For a second that you are in Bethlehem the night that Jesus was born, and somebody walks up to you and asks you, who is king? After all, the birth of Jesus is the reason why we celebrate Christmas, is the reason why we stop everything that we're doing on the 25th of December, is the reason we're going to gather together as families, is the reason why we're going to eat, is the reason why we're going to sing songs. So if somebody would have walked up to you on that night, the night that Jesus was born, and asked you, who is king? What you would have said? We're going to continue with the series that we started a couple of weeks ago. On the first week, we talked about Mary, and we talked about the fact that she was a young woman, probably somewhere around 13 years of age, when she received this visitation from the angel, letting her know that she was going to be the mother of Jesus. And we saw the courage of this 13-year-old compared to the fears of Zechariah, a priest, somebody who had the title, somebody who had all the recognition as a priest, and how he failed to hear the voice of God and to believe what God was telling him while standing literally in the Holy of Holies in the temple. And you have this young woman in the middle of Nazareth, a poor community, who is actually embracing this with Jesus, with the angel is telling her about Jesus. So we have incredible courage from this 13-year-old that is willing to believe what God is saying, while this older man that is an official member of the hierarchy of the church is not willing to do so, and actually becomes mute because of his lack of faith. And then yet last week we talked about Joseph, and we talked about this reality of everything that Joseph had invested. He had worked hard, he had prepared himself, he had become a carpenter, he had worked hard to be able to choose a young lady who he was going to be able to marry, build a family, have a home, have children, love on them. He had worked hard, he had done, the Bible itself tells us that he's a just, good man, and yet he worked extremely hard for that dream. And just in a blink of an eye, his dream is destroyed, and he's called upon to be able to follow what God is asking him to do, and he's willing to do so. He's actually willing to sacrifice what he had worked for in order to be faithful to what God is asking him to do. And today, we're going to continue with that question, right? Again, if you would have been in Bethlehem on the night that Jesus was born, somebody walks up to you and asks you, who is king, then what you would have said? Like, how would you have reacted? What you would have said at the time? Well, the answer could have included a couple of names. And we have some pictures of these guys that would have been official members of government during that time that could have possibly been an answer to that question. Well, the most normal answer probably would have been Caesar Augustus, right? This Caesar Augustus was the absolute emperor of the Roman Empire. He was, through a series of very savvy political moves, he had destroyed two rivals that he had. At one point in time, there were three of them who were in charge of the government, and he had found a way to be able to get rid of the other two in order for him to become the sole emperor of the empire. And furthermore, he had gotten the Roman Senate to be able to name him Augustus, right? And which literally means the majestic, right? That almost is given to him a semi-god or quasi-god kind of status in the eyes of the Roman Senate or in the eyes of the Roman government. So that would have been one of the choices. Some people would say, definitely, the answer is Caesar Augustus. He is the man. He is the emperor. He's the one in charge of everything that we're doing. Some people would have said Quirinius, right? Like Quirinius was the governor, right? And specifically, when we say governor, it's more somebody who governs on behalf of the emperor, right? Like normally we think about a governor as somebody who was elected by the people. But in this case, a governor would have been governing a specific area on behalf of the Roman Empire. So he was a governor of the Syrian province that would eventually include Judea, right? Actually, at the time, it didn't include Judea, but the Syrian province was growing and growing and growing. This province eventually was going to be able to take over Judea. So perhaps some people would have said, hey, Quirinius is really the one who is in charge. He's really the one who's here. He's really the one who is our king. Or there was somebody who actually carried the title king, right? And I mean, some people will call it a servant king or a client king or a pseudo king, which means that he was a puppet that the government of Rome had left in place in order not to disturb the reality of the people, have led him to be the king for the time being, even though he really didn't have any of the powers that normally would go with a king, and everything that they did had to be responded. But the problem is, he was a puppet king who spent most of his time either doing parties and inviting people from all kinds of places and wasting money, or he was spending time in a paranoid state, wondering about everybody else. And the sad reality, right, is that while these kings and these governors and these people who were in power and had an enormous amount of power, these people who were in power were there, they never were able to deliver salvation to the people. In other words, they never did anything to be able to improve the life of the people that they were serving or to deliver salvation for them. Caesar Augustus, clearly a person that was very focused on himself, very focused on Rome, if anything, couldn't care less about a province all the way far away from the rest of the kingdom. We have a map that we can show you that will help you to be able to see this better. But again, if you think about this as the Roman Empire, the center is literally in the center, right? The center is in Italy, right? Rome is in Italy, and that would have been the center of this Roman Empire. And as you can see, right, Italy has water in 4 sides, so that gave them the ability to be able to move through this land very effectively, so they have been able to take control of it. So if you think about Judea and Syria, they're all the way over here, right? They're in the very edge of the kingdom, right? So as you can see, right, it's the very, very, very far corner of the kingdom. So again, the center identity, the center of power was Rome. So you didn't really think about Judea as much of a place to be worried about or to be concerned, and certainly not a place where a king was going to come from. So the irony is the people in power, the people who had the ability to be able to make a change, the people who had the ability to be able to deliver salvation, they had done nothing to be able to deliver such a change for the people of Judea. And yet, the creator of heaven and earth has been born on that night. And Bethlehem doesn't even realize what is happening. But why is that? Why is this happening this way? Well, I wanted to invite you to go with me to Luke chapter 2, and we're going to read verses 1 through 7. So if you have your Bible with you, or if you have a cell phone that you can look at, if not, we're going to be able to provide them for them in our screen, but we want you to be able to follow along with us as we read these verses. But Luke chapter 2, verses 1 through 7, and we're going to read through it. We're going to stop and be able to read through it, hopefully help you to be able to see them in a new way as we read this hopefully familiar verses for you. And it says this: in those days, Caesar Augustus, we already heard about this guy, right? The guy who is the ultimately person in charge, the one that had all the power, the one who had eliminated 2 other very powerful guys, and that had taken place fairly recent. So people were afraid of this guy. Nobody wanted to be able to mess with him. He issued a decree, right? Isn't that interesting, right? Like, I mean, you issue a decree. What kind of position you have to be in order to be able to issue a decree, right? I can't imagine me walking into my house and going, hear ye, make my dinner and clean my room, right? I can't do that, right? Like, I mean, my children, my wife will probably laugh at me. It's like, what do you mean? Like, who do you think you are? Yet, Caesar Augustus, all the way in Rome, has the power to be able to call the whole empire to follow a specific decree. That's the level of power that he has. And that really tells you the amount of power, right? He issued it, he decrees it, it needs to happen. So in those days, Caesar Augustus issued a decree that a census should be taken in the entire Roman world. So all of that Roman Empire, right? We had the picture of the Roman Empire just a second ago. All of the Roman Empire, and just to give you a point of reference, right? That is Spain, Portugal, France, Germany, right? Greece, all of this is Africa, right? All of this, right, had to go and be a part of a census simply because Caesar Augustus was calling them to do so. And you might ask yourself, well, why was that, right? Because when we think about census, what we're really thinking about is, well, that's going to provide more resources for schools. That's going to help us to provide resources for our streets and our governments. But that wasn't the case, right? There was only one reason why Caesar Augustus wanted to do a census. Caesar Augustus wanted to do a census so that he knew what amount of taxes he was supposed to be getting from all the provinces that were around, right? So he wanted to know, well, how many people live here and how much money are they supposed to be paying to Rome, to the center of power of this empire. So he didn't care about the people. It wasn't about like, how can we better serve them? No, he wanted to make sure, are we getting the right amount of taxes in relation to how many people are in our empire? And the reality is that when you go to Rome, right, you're going to see the Colosseum. You're going to see the basilicas. You're going to see this incredible ancient statues and this incredible ancient structures. And you wonder, well, wow, how beautiful it was. Look at all the resources they got. Well, the reason why they had those resources is because the empire was oppressing everybody else, right? So all the resources from these countries are all going to Rome, where Rome can then be able to build whatever they want to build. And they can create these amazing, magnificent cities in and around Rome and in Italy because they are taking money, right? So if you are in Judea, I mean, this is a form of oppression, right? They're trying to make sure that they can get enough money out of you. And it's not even going to your community. That money is going to go somewhere else. The emperor is making sure that he has all the money that he's supposed to steal from you because it's not going to your benefit. It's not going to help you. It's not going to improve your community. It's all going to Rome. So again, verse 2 says, verse 1, in those days, Caesar Augustus issued a decree in a census that was taken of the entire Roman world. Verse 2 continues, says, this is what the first census that took place while Quirinius was the governor of Syria. This is sort of an interesting reality here that can be confusing at times. There was a second census that took place under Quirinius as governor of Syria on year 6 after Jesus, right? So, or the year 6 of the Common Era, right? This is taking place, presumably, on year 0, although we know that it's not, that the historians didn't get it quite right at the time, and it's not, Jesus wasn't born on 0, although that was the intention, that they were trying to find the year that Jesus was born. But on year 6, there is a census that takes place under Quirinius, and there is a revolt that takes place in the Judean hill, because at that time, Judea had been joined with Syria. So Luke is trying to say, listen, all of you know about that one census when Quirinius was the governor of Syria, but also included Judea. And everybody knows what happened and all the fights that took place and the revolt that took place and the zealots and all that stuff. This is not the one, right? We're really talking about what happened, the first one that happened before that one. That's what Luke is trying to say in this place, which really speaks to the fact that Herod is going to be taken out of power. At the time of the census, Herod is in power and probably thinks, well, I'm going to be in power for the rest of my life. I'm going to be the one in charge. I'm going to be the one, I'm the man. But yet the reality is that in a couple of years, him and his children will be removed from power, and Quirinius is going to be the one that is going to be there. Third, it says, verse 3 says, and everyone went to their own town to register. So 2 important things here. Number 1, Caesar Augustus decreed it, and guess what everybody did? They follow up with it. They had to do it. They were under an oppressive government that was ruling them with the sword, that had enormous amount of power over them. So Caesar Augustus decreed it. They had to do it. So, I mean, millions of people had to go and register in order to be able to do this, simply because Caesar Augustus called it upon. So, I mean, imagine that kind of power, right? If you had that kind of power, then how many good things you could do with that kind of power. And yet, what he did is register them to make sure what money do we have, right? So up to this point, we've been talking about 10,000 feet. And now we're going to go down, right? In the next verse, we're going to go down to the reality of Bethlehem and the reality of Mary, Joseph, and Jesus. So verse 4 continues and says, so Joseph also went up from the town of Nazareth in Galilee to Judea, to Bethlehem, the town of David, because he belonged to the house and line of David. And we have that other map that I want to be able to show you here to kind of talk a little bit about it so you can see this reality, okay? So if you have the Roman Empire, this is just the one little corner of the Roman Empire. But there's a couple important places I want to be able to point out to you here. Number one, again, this is Galilee. This is primarily a poor area that had a subtropical weather, which means a lot of the food was harvested. A lot of the fishing took place in the Sea of Galilee. A lot of the hard work was done here, and then they will harvest it here, they will fish it here, they will grow it here, and then they will come down to Jerusalem, who was the capital, in this hill country where there was not a subtropical weather, and it was much more difficult to be able to grow things, and they will sell it here. The market was in Jerusalem. So there was about, between Nazareth and Jerusalem, there's roughly about 70 miles, which we talked about last week. It's about the distance between here and Daytona Beach. And right next to Jerusalem, in this hill country, right, this is a very hilly type country, is Bethlehem, which is the place where Jesus was born. Now, we know that Mary was from Nazareth, and we know that Joseph is from Bethlehem. We know that Elizabeth and Zechariah, who are the cousins of Mary, are from this hill country. Well, guess what, right? In this story, it's telling us that Joseph is going to come from Nazareth to go down to Bethlehem to be counted in the census. And you're like, well, Pastor, why is that important? Why do I care about that? Well, that's very important, because what that tells me is normally, if I got married to a young woman, right? I was in my 20s, early 20s. She would have been 13, 14, 15, maybe 16. I would have been 19, 20, 21, 22. So I would have gotten married, but the whole point of getting married, right? I will give a dowry. I will give a deposit, like we've been talking about for the last couple of weeks. I will make that engagement. I will do that, right? But the whole point of me putting down that deposit is because she is going to go from Nazareth to come with me to Bethlehem, because that's where I live, and that's where my house is, and that's where my lineage is, and that's where the rest of my family is, and that's where I can best take care of her. But in this particular case, we see that they're not in Bethlehem. They are in Nazareth, which tells you what? That nobody believed what Mary has said about my baby's born from the Holy Spirit. Nobody had believed what Joseph has said about, I had a dream where the angel came and spoke to me and told me that this baby is going to be from the Holy Spirit. So he literally had to move to Nazareth because he lacked the support from his family. And now, because Caesar Augustus wants it, they are having to travel all the way to Bethlehem while she's about to give birth. I mean, can you think about the worst road trip that you ever had in your life? Can you imagine, right? You go to the town square, you hear everybody has to go report to their town of origin in order to be able to be counted, because Caesar Augustus says so. And you have to go into your house, you're like, sweetie, hey, I'm sorry, but we're going to have to go to Bethlehem, where you know all that family that doesn't like you, and all that family that had betrayed us and don't want to hear from us. Well, we got to go there, and we got to be able to go there so that we can be counted, so that we can pay more taxes to Caesar Augustus. I mean, can you imagine how difficult that would have been? How difficult of a travel? Can you imagine how difficult that conversations would have been? I mean, at the very least, in a normal way, it would have taken two to 3 days of travel with a pregnant wife in a donkey trying to make the journey over there, or presumably in a donkey. That we would have been talking about 4 or 5 days of travel in order to get there. I mean, this would have been extremely difficult. I mean, I can't even imagine this situation. So again, verse 4. So Joseph also went from the town of Nazareth in Galilee to Judea, to Bethlehem, to the town of David, because he belonged to the house and the line of David. And he went there to register with Mary, who was pledged to be married to him and was expecting a child. I mean, that phrase, pledged to be married to him and expecting a child, is about the weirdest, right? The weirdest kind of sentence that you can think about, right? You never would have been pledged to be married and waiting to have a baby kind of in the same sentence, right? Like that would have been extremely difficult normally for people to be able to wrap their brains around. Verse 6 continues, it says, while they were there, the time came for the baby to be born, and she gave birth to her firstborn, a son. And you're like, well, why does it take the time to specify that it was a son, right? Because the promise of the angel and the invitation that the angel have made to them is that you will have a baby and he's going to be a son. So it was a part of the certification, a part of the affirmation that this reality that the angel have promised is actually coming into fruition. That this baby is who they've been waiting for, that truly this is the Messiah. The Bible goes on and says, she wrapped him in clothes and placed him in a manger because there was no guest room available for them. I want to repeat that last sentence. She wrapped him in her clothes and placed him in a manger because there was no guest room available to them. A manger is a place where animals eat from, right? Domesticated, semi-domesticated animals like donkeys and sheep and goats, they would have eaten out of this elevated form of, like elevated the food off the ground for them to be able to eat. That's the place where the saliva and the eatings and the what came out of the mouth of these animals, that's the place where the creator of the universe, the one that called this world into existence, the one that came here to be able to save you and me, that's where he was born. I mean, it's hard to believe that you can think about a more humble situation. And he's been born in these circumstances because an oppressive government is oppressing his family, is oppressing his country, is oppressing his family, and forcing his mother and his father to have to go to the very place that they didn't want to go to in order to be born. And ultimately finds himself being born in a manger because all of the family of Joseph is unwilling to be able to accept this wife, this mother, and this baby. And you're like, well, why would you say that, right? We talked about it last week, but it's better repeating, right? If Joseph was there, right? If they were there because of a decree from Caesar Augustus, that also meant that everyone in Joseph's family was also there. That means the aunt and grandma and grandpa and our uncle and our cousins and everybody else who belonged to Bethlehem and to the house of David had to be there too. They have to be there too because they all were required under the decree of Caesar Augustus to be at that location. It also means that that's where their ancestral home came from. That's where the big house where grandpa receives everybody and they do the celebrations and the festivals and all that stuff. That's what it would have been, which ultimately means that Joseph's whole family did not welcome Mary and ultimately did not welcome Jesus. So the irony in this reality, right? Caesar Augustus, the emperor of the universe and the emperor of the known world at the time, doesn't even think about the birth of the greatest king of all time. Herod can't even think about this. I mean, all he thinks about is parties and paranoia. Joseph's family rejects Mary, rejects Joseph, rejects this baby. And even the people of Bethlehem are not able to identify that truly this is the King of Kings that is born. This is the creator of the universe. This is Yahweh made into a man that is in front of us, and we are missing, and ultimately we're rejecting it. In every single level of society, this coming king, this promised king that we've been waiting for years and years and years, is being utterly and completely rejected, with the exception of two people, Mary and Joseph. So let me ask you this, right? And as we close our time together, it's easy for us to be able to put ourselves in a position where we judge him. How bad is Caesar Augustus? How dare him call everybody to leave whatever they were doing, to go into the census, to be counted so that he can get more tax for him? How dare him not realize that Jesus is being born? How dare Herod, in all his power, in all his paranoia, in all his parties, not even to realize that Jesus has been born? How dare Bethlehem not recognize that the King of Kings, that the promised king that has been prophesied, that is going to be born in Bethlehem, and not even realize that he's been born on that night? And how dare Joseph's family to not hear what the angel said, where they were telling them, how dare all of them reject the king into their lives, and the force of the king and the ministry of this king into their life. So let me ask you this, right? We have that hindsight of being able to be able to look back. But the question for us is this: where are you failing to see the coming king in your life today? At this moment, on this day, as you watch this video, where are you failing to see the king? Jesus is as available to you as it was available to Bethlehem on the night that he was born. So before we point, and before we look at around us and be able to point to the people in this text, we had to look ourselves in the mirror and ask, are we different? Or are we failing to see the coming king, just like they did? Thank you for taking the time to be able to watch this video and be a part of this conversation. We encourage you to look in this feed, and you can find other activities that might be of interest to you and your family. Right now, we invite you to be a part of worship.
Stand up and worship with us. Morning.